Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and what hopefully is the beginning of your first steps into a career in becoming a teacher. We've got an hour as such, and I'm just going to speak for maybe 15-20 minutes or so of that, maybe a little bit longer. And I'm just going to give you a kind of overview really of bits about the course from the primary and secondary PGCE here at Brunel, which is housed in the Department of Education at Brunel, and give you a little bit about some of the kind of principles really and the ethos that really drives the PGCE programs as well, and hopefully give you a good sense of what studying for a PGCE is like at Brunel University if you do decide to join us, which we very much hope that you do. So my name's Dr. Ian Cushing, and I'm a lecturer in education at Brunel, and have various roles related to teaching within the department, part of which is on the secondary English PGCE programme. Okay, so feel free to use the chat as we go through, and if it's okay, I won't answer any questions as I'm talking, but at the end I'll make sure to go through those questions, and as far as possible I'll answer them, okay? And if I can't answer them directly and specifically, I'll certainly be able to point you in the right direction of people who will be able to help. Okay. All right, so we normally start by showing this video from the Department for Education, the Every Lesson Shapes a Life video. And I'm not going to show the video because I'm sure that you've probably seen it, and it's certainly something that you can go away and look at in your own time. But I think actually the video is a really nice illustration of the kind of power of teaching, really, and the way in which every lesson does indeed shape a life, and every teacher does indeed shape a life, and every interaction that you have with a young person as a teacher is interesting. There's unpredictability, there's excitement, there's engagement, there's chance for relationship building, there's chance to share your own passion about your subject or about working with young people in whatever way you see. And so it truly is one of the most interesting careers that you can have. Certainly before I moved to university teaching, I spent about 10 years as a secondary school teacher in various schools across London. And in the same way that every lesson shaped a student's life, it's really shaped my own life as well. And every day was indeed very much different, which is a bit of a cliche with teaching, but I think there's a reason why it's a cliche and why it continues to sort of persist and resonate. Okay, so do take the chance to watch the advert if you haven't seen it, and it's quite an inspirational short video about, as I say, the power of teaching, really. Okay, so Brunel University Department for Education and our PGC programme is something that we're really genuinely proud about, and here's just a few things that I think we really want to try and foreground and emphasise in terms of things that we as a department can celebrate in terms of the work that we do and the very collaborative work that we do. So pupil progress and student progress is really at the heart of our provision. So we're very much a pastoral team who maintain very good working relationships with our students. A really high proportion of students graded as either good or outstanding according to what's called the teacher standards by the end of our courses last year, with a very, very high proportion of primary and secondary students who are in either full-time or part-time employment by the end of the course. And indeed, working with my trainees this morning, even in the middle of December, they're already beginning to write to me and say, oh, my placement school have offered me a job for next year, which is just brilliant and very much a testament to their hard work. So a very high percent of student satisfaction in things like interim and end of module reviews for both primary and secondary students. And we really see students make progress as they develop from phase to phase. And that's one of the joys actually of teaching on a PGCE programme, of teaching them at university and then seeing them going into schools and making that very concrete and very highly visible progress as they move through the course. And Brunel has been educating students in teacher education for hundreds of years. It's got a very long history and a very long tradition of teacher education that we're very, very proud of. And indeed, we use the phrase teacher education as opposed to teacher training, because we think that academic education in teaching and pedagogy is central to the success of our course. And we have a very strong concept of what we call partnership. And what I mean by partnership is the way that we interact and relate to our partnership schools, i.e. the places where you'll go on to placement for much of the year. Okay, other things to celebrate then within the department more broadly, as well as teacher education and as well as support for NQTs, so newly qualified teachers. We have a BA education programme and an MA education programme, as well as doctoral students and PhD students. And a lot of our teacher education students often end up coming back to us for various ways to study for MAs and PhDs. And we very much embrace what we're calling kind of diversity. And I know that's a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but actually it's been something that's always helped to shape our own curriculum and our own pedagogies with a real commitment to social justice. And I use that phrase very, very seriously in the sense of our student demographics, many of them coming from BME backgrounds and from various socio-economic backgrounds, and the types of schools that we work with, predominantly in the West London area, but also throughout London and the home counties as well. You may well know that in terms of where we are in terms of London then, so vibrant campus and very close access to London. Of course, our students this year haven't been on campus, which is a real shame, but the online teaching that we've been doing has been really enjoyable. And I think that's partly down to the students, but also partly down to our staff members, who are all world-leading experts in their particular pedagogical approaches within their subjects. And indeed, all of our staff members are research active, publishing in internationally and nationally renowned journal articles. And so we like to see ourselves as critical and reflective practitioners. That's really at the heart of what we do, criticality and reflexivity, who are also very, very engaged in classroom-based research and policy making within education more broadly. Okay. So as I mentioned then, the partnership is something that's really, really important to the success of any PGCE programme, but in particular, we're very, very proud of the partnership that we've got between the Department for Education and our partnership schools, our kind of vast network of partnership schools, really. So here's a picture of some of our academic staff with our mentors, so the people that are in schools that will essentially kind of look after you as such when you're out on placement and help you progress as a teacher. So it's important to think of a PGCE as not a disconnect between university and school-based experience, but as something that maintains close contact and that is in a relationship with each other. And indeed, lots of the partnership schools that we're in partnership with are often sites for our own research, and so they play an active role in the community and the life of the Department for Education. And our partnership management group are a dedicated team of staff who do things like organise placements for students, maintain close contact with mentors, communicate between schools and students and the university, and really help to make sure that partnership works in very visible ways that's of benefit to you as students and us as staff. So the partnership schools that we work with then, as I say, many of them are in different areas across London, but more densely concentrated within a kind of reasonable distance of Brunel's campus. So mostly concentrated towards West London and the home counties out towards the west and northwest of London. And here's a couple of images of student teachers working with students in a primary school. I'm not sure which school that's from, and a secondary school, a science lesson there as well. So partnership schools are all state maintained schools, many of them within close distance to Brunel, but we also have quite a good number of contacts all the way across London. So for example, I'm supporting a student this year who's out in South East London, a student in North East London, a student out in Surrey, so all over really. Okay, so if you decide to join us here at Brunel, then you'll get a huge amount of support, and really it's important to think about that support being triangulated across the university, with various channels for support within the university, and the support, of course, that you'll experience in school. So within the university, you have an extensive range of people who can support you. So your university tutors, so academics within the department, so people like me, but also people within our student centre and our academic skills service, our library facilities, the student welfare centre, the student union, all various different people that you can draw upon for support, and a network of support that you can draw upon as you move throughout the PGCE. And support is something that you'll need. The PGCE is a difficult course, yet a thoroughly enjoyable one, and it's really important that you know where to get that support, and that you know if you do come to Brunel that you'll have that support available to you, which you will. The second bullet point there then mentions mentors in your partnership schools. So that's one of the kind of key people that will give you their support when you're on your placement in schools. And the mentor is somebody who, I used the phrase looks after you earlier, but really that's kind of accurate, but it's a bit more than that. It's a mentor, so it's someone who will help you develop as a teacher, and it's likely that you'll develop a really good, quite close working relationship with that mentor. If you're thinking about a secondary PGCE, then that mentor will be somebody within the subject department. So if, for example, you're thinking of a science PGCE, then your mentor will be a science teacher. And our mentors, again, have varying degrees of experience, but some of whom have been mentoring students for decades. And so you aren't just able to draw on the expertise of the academic staff, but you're also able to draw on the vast expertise of your mentors within schools. Okay. So thinking about the programme structure then, okay, so here's a diagram which kind of maps out the year of the PGCE, and you can see from that then that it's kind of organised into kind of three chunks as such, with the university, school A, and then school B. So everybody who does a PGCE will experience placements in two different schools. Okay, so let's call those school A and school B. And over the spread of school A and school B, you'll spend 120 days within those two schools. Okay, and at the kind of bookend of that school experience are two periods of time at university. And the first period of university is a fairly intensive 4 to 5 weeks programme of academic input from lecturers within the department. So pretty much all of September and the beginning of October, you're in university having lectures, seminars, workshops, talks, doing bits of micro teaching perhaps, where you're learning about the pedagogies and the theories and the educational applications of your particular subject if you're in secondary, and primary education if you're thinking about primary PGCE. Okay, so those university sessions take place every day of the week apart from Thursdays. and Thursdays you have the chance to do some directed study, to catch up on reading, to do things like assignments, which I'll talk about in a moment. The phase 1 school experience, you start here, as it says here on the diagram, okay, and I'll talk more about the phase 1 school experience. And then after your phase 1 school experience, you have what's called an alternative setting experience, okay. So the alternative setting experience is something that's quite unique to Brunel, and this is the opportunity for you to go into a school where, so somewhere like a pupil referral unit, maybe a sixth form college, a nursery, some kind of alternative educational setting that's outside the kind of normal primary and secondary mainstream schooling experience. And the students and the feedback that we get from students on the PGCE course about that alternative setting is always really positive. It's always one of the real highlights of the year. And indeed, it's a real uniqueness about the programme, and it's also a very unique experience that you can then draw upon and apply to your more mainstream school experiences. Okay, so I've put up the kind of whole map of the year here. So you see your phase 1 school experience starts about mid-October, ends about mid-February, and then your phase 2 school experience, which is slightly shorter, starts about mid-April and then ends about mid-June. Okay, so throughout that we would expect 100% attendance for both university and placement. So you should treat the PGCE year as if you're doing a full-time job, really. That's really the way to approach it. So things like booking holidays shouldn't happen until term times are confirmed. Okay. And importantly, of course, we give you a break. And I was just seeing my secondary students this morning who have been brilliant this year amidst all of the various issues with COVID, etc. And they've done wonderful, but they're definitely ready for a break. So we do give you a bit of time off as well. Okay, so alongside the school experience and alongside the input from university, you have master's level assignments to do. Okay, so for secondary, we ask that you do 3 assignments, and the assignments are all compulsory, and they're all compulsory in you getting your PGCE qualification, so that master's level qualification. So we split the the university input into 3 different modules. So very inspirationally called Education Studies 1, 2 and 3. And you'll see there that the Education Studies 1 is a simple 2,000 word essay, and this is about professionalism, and it's a chance for you to really start to reflect on your own emerging kind of pedagogical principles, so your own teaching principles as a teacher, and to give you a chance to construct a sense of identity around being a teacher. And that's very much a part of what we really focus on in those first few sessions. You know, who are you as a teacher, and who do you want to be, and what's that emerging identity as a teacher, and how then might you draw on academic research and academic literature in order to be able to enact that identity in your own teaching. For Education Studies number 2 and 3, they're kind of linked. So Education Studies 2, we ask you to do a literature review of a particular aspect of the curriculum that you're interested in. So that could be anything from decolonizing the literature curriculum to looking at the teaching of cells in biology, or the teaching of phonics in primary, something that particularly interests you, okay? And then for Education Studies number 3, that's a really practical assignment where we ask you to design and then implement and then evaluate what we call a medium-term plan. So that's a series of about 5 or 6 lessons which you design that are theoretically informed by some of the research and some of the reading that you've done. And you then go and teach those lessons in your placement school. And then you evaluate the kind of efficacy of those lessons, again, in relation to the academic research and academic literature. For primary then, so same kind of structure in the sense that that we have 3 different modules, so studies 1, 2 and 3, but they're slightly different assignments. So primary students start off with a critique on behaviour for learning approaches, so looking at the different ways that teachers might implement behaviour for learning strategies or different classroom kind of routines for the managing of behaviour, and that's a 2,000 word assignment. And then for education studies number 2, that's very much linked to the placement school, because we ask students to do what we call a case study of a pupil with special educational needs in the core subjects of English, Maths and Science. So we get some really interesting assignments where students have looked in depth at the kind of lived experience of different pupils with SEN in order to try and understand their kind of lives in primary school. And we ask students not to complete a kind of traditional academic essay for that, but we ask them to do a poster presentation that's then done to the rest of the primary cohort and academic staff members within the department. And then finally, for education studies number 3, we ask students to do a research project. And this is a little bit like the secondary assignment that I mentioned earlier, where we ask students to think about an aspect of the curriculum that really interests them and to kind of intervene in the curriculum in a various way to design something that they think is going to really change and enhance curriculum delivery in a positive way. And that's framed as a research project where you're in schools collecting data as such and then analysing that. Okay, and we ask students again to do a presentation with that. Okay, so that's the kind of content of the academic side of things. And moving on to the financial side of things, for bursaries, it's really important that you check out the bursaries and funding section of the DFE's Get Into Teaching website. And it's really important that you do that now if you're thinking of doing a PGCE, because the DFE recently changed the bursaries that they've made available to students that are thinking of completing a PGCE next year. So if you checked it a month ago, for example, it might have changed since then, and the amount of bursary that's available to you will be different depending on the level that you want to teach, so primary or secondary. And if you're thinking of secondary, it will change according to the subject that you want to teach. Okay, so at secondary, we offer English, Maths, Science, and Physical Education. Okay. In terms of the fees that are charged by the university, we charge the kind of standard fees there of just over 9,000 for the year. But there's a discount for any of you who might be alumni students or prompt payments. And again, you can find out much more information about fees on that website on the 3rd bullet point. Okay. There are a number of scholarships available as well, especially for those students who are thinking of teaching secondary science or maths. So have a look at the Institute for Physics or the Royal Society of Chemistry or the Institute of Mathematics if you're one of those students. Okay. So in terms of entry requirements then, so thinking about making an application, so we would normally ask for a 2-2 classification or above in an undergraduate or postgraduate degree in the field in which you intend to teach. Okay, so for secondary students, it's quite important that that undergraduate degree or postgraduate degree is either in the subject that you think that you want to teach or very, very closely related. Okay. Normally we ask for that to be a 2-2 classification, okay, because this is a master's level professional study, although we do have a 2-1 expectation for those of you that might be thinking about doing physical education at secondary level. Okay. We ask that all applicants have maths and English grades 4 and above, so A star to C or equivalent. Okay, and there's various equivalency tests that the university can offer you at GCSE level, plus science for those that are considering a primary course. Okay. So in thinking about putting an application together then, and again, this is something that we really recommend and really hope that you do, in that application, and when I talk about this, I'm talking about the personal statements, perhaps thinking about some of the references that you look for, perhaps thinking about some of the activities that you might do before you put an application into the university. So number one, we think it's really important that all applicants have some level of school experience. Okay, now I realise that might be difficult at the moment during COVID, okay, and we're very pragmatic, okay, about that. But if it's at all possible, if you can find some recent and relevant experience of school education in the UK, that looks really, really good. And it's also really important for you as an applicant to make sure that teaching is going to be the right thing for you. Okay, it doesn't matter if you don't get experience in exactly the same phase or subjects that you're thinking of teaching. That's ideal if you can, but it's about a generic school experience more broadly. Okay. Other things that we recommend you really highlighting in your application are particular modules within your degree course that you feel might have provided a particularly good foundation in terms of your subject knowledge for the phase or the subject that you're applying to teach. So if you've got particular strength and subject knowledge that you want to really highlight or you really want to identify and let us know about, make sure to put that into the application. Of course, you're going to be working with young people, so we want to see evidence of an energetic and an enthusiastic and a committed approach to working with young people. That needs to be really, really clear in your application. And another thing that I always like to see is what we call a kind of informed personal philosophy of your aims of teaching. So why is it that you want to teach? And what kind of teacher do you imagine yourself to be? And what kind of classroom space do you imagine taking place? What does your classroom look like, or what do you want it to look like and sound like and feel like? Give us a sense of the type of teacher that you are or that you want to be. Okay. And then finally, the last two bullet points are really related to policy initiatives. Okay, so recent changes in the curriculum, perhaps, or recent changes to assessment, or recent government changes that you think are particularly important, and some of those more statutory requirements, perhaps concerning curriculum or assessment in regards to your particular phase or your particular secondary school subject, would be really, really important to put into your application. So in terms of dates then, so the course starts on Monday the 6th of September 21, and it starts in earnest on that day, where we're straight into teaching at the university on the 6th of September, and you'll be at the university, as I say, until you start your placement at the beginning of October. And you can register from the 24th of August or so. Okay, so if you are thinking of starting a PGCE, then make sure that those dates are clear and you're ready to go. And I think that is everything from me. I talked earlier about the partnership. Here's from of our students from last year. So I won't talk about the partnership again, but I'll now hand over to those of you who are joining us and say, first of all, thanks so much again for joining us, and thanks so much for listening. I can see that there's been a couple of private questions that have come in to me, which is fine, and I'll take the time to answer those. But if you feel comfortable doing so, it might be easier to ask your question publicly. I think you should be able to do that, because it may well be that other people want to ask the same question. So if you want to ask the question just by talking, that's fine, or you can just put it into the group chat if you prefer, and I'll answer it. Okay, so I'll just wait a minute or so for you to have a think if there's any questions or so. So don't worry if everything goes silent for a minute. Hi Jessica, thanks for that question. So you ask, I have a previous experience in a school. Do you have set partnership with certain schools, or could I do a placement with this school? Yeah, good question. I mean, it certainly might be possible that you're able to do a placement with this school. Although we do have existing relationships with partnership schools who are generally able to offer us placements. Um, I would probably argue that we encourage all students who have had previous experience in local schools to take the opportunity to have experience at two different schools. Okay, I think that's really important for student teachers because it helps them to see a different range of schools and a different range of settings. Okay, so I would encourage you to see it as an opportunity to get experience in a wider variety of settings. Oh, thanks, Marwa. I didn't realise you couldn't unmute yourselves. Okay, so you'll have to ask your questions into here. Okay. Okay, so this is a question about QTS. So QTS, that stands for Qualified Teacher Status. So qualified teacher status is something that comes out of the school placement. Okay, so at the end of both of your school placements, you'll have an assessment as such with your mentor and a visit from your university tutor. And that's an assessment against your teaching practice. Okay, so if you pass both of those placements, which is highly likely, it's very, very rare that students don't pass those placements, then you'll be awarded qualified teacher status. Okay, the assessment results that you get from the university, from your assignments, will gain you your master's level PGCE qualification. Okay, so if you pass the university assignments and you pass the school-based experience, which again the far majority of students do, then the qualification that you'll be left with will be a PGCE in either primary or secondary with recommendation for QTS. All right. Okay, so Shona, moving on to Shona's question. I've worked as a teaching assistant at school previously. However, it was at an international school which didn't follow the British national curriculum. Would this be an issue? Yeah, good question, Shona. No, I don't see that as an issue at all. In fact, I see it as a real positive and a real affordance, because you're able to bring in some international perspectives to your own teaching, which I think is great. I think it's really important that we look outside schooling within the UK. Okay, so don't see that at all as a problem. It's a positive and something great that you would bring to the course and to your own teaching here. I think probably on your application, it might be a good idea to just indicate that you're gaining familiarity with the British national curriculum. Okay, so having a read of the curriculum might be a good thing to do before your application, but it's certainly not an issue in the sense that you've got experience in an international school. Okay. Next question from Siddharth, thank you. So when are we going to have the GCSE equivalent exams for primary school PGCE? Well, that's a really good question, actually. I think the best way that I could probably answer that question, Siddharth, rather than try and fudge an answer, which wouldn't be good, particularly good practice, okay, I'm going to type in here for you, Siddharth. If you contact Brunel, a department called the Taught Programmes Office, okay, and if you just Google that phrase and then Brunel, you can very easily find a contact email address. They'll be able to answer your question for you because they deal with things like the equivalency tests and things. Okay, I hope that's okay. Rimsha's question at 6:32. I think this is quite similar to Shona's question, in the sense that you've had experience in an IB school. I think that will help your application rather than hinder it. Okay, again, you're able to draw on international perspectives and international comparisons, which is great. It's a really, really good thing. Again, similar to the advice that I gave to Shona, in your application, I would really encourage you to make sure that you're including that you're moving towards an awareness of the UK national curriculum, okay, because that's the curriculum that the schools will be teaching in the partnership schools, okay. Jessica's question 633 is about accommodation. Yep, there's accommodation available on campus. There is, yep. That's something you can find out more, again, just simply through the Brunel University. And a lot of our students indeed choose to stay on campus. Oh, good question, Amber, about the interview process. Okay, so for primary and secondary, it's fairly similar. So I can speak generally here about the process for primary and secondary. They're all done online at the moment. Normally we do them on campus, but they've all taken place online. So be prepared for an online interview. We ask you to do a number of things in the interview. We ask you to first of all watch a couple of videos about the course. Some of that information that I've talked about will be repeated. We then ask you to prepare a kind of short mini lesson, if you will, okay, based on a particular task to do with your specific subject or phase, okay. So we ask you for 5 minutes to teach a lesson. And really the purpose of that is for us to get a sense of your approach to teaching and to see what you can do creatively with a given task. And you're free to use PowerPoint or materials if you want to and share your screen. Okay, there's obviously limits in terms of resources that you can use, but it's about us getting a sense of how you approach a very short lesson, the way that you structure it, the language that you use in that lesson, the types of questions you might ask, the activities that you might design. Yeah, it's for us to kind of get a handle on who you might be as a teacher. So that's for 5 minutes, and then there's about a 15-minute interview, about 8 questions or so. In that interview, we would ask you questions such as, what motivates you to want to become a teacher? Tell us a little bit about some of your school experience. Why is it that you want to come and study at Brunel? We might ask you to talk about a particular educational issue that's caught your attention, and so on. Okay. So moving on to Mariam's question. Sorry, Mariam, just give me a second to read this. You're very welcome. Okay, so you can contact Mariam, the head of, the director of initial teacher education. Okay, and that's my colleague Sunita, and I've put her name in the chat there. And again, if you Google her name, then you'll be able to easily find her email address. Okay. Okay, question at 6:34 from Nikhil. The latest state that university would register a student onto the PGCE course. Is there a deadline or cut-off? Well, we encourage students to apply as soon as possible. Okay, and there's various reasons for that, and it depends on the subject. So if, for example, you're considering doing physical education secondary, then there is a limit on student numbers. Okay, so it depends on the subject that you're thinking of teaching. But we do interview throughout the summer, although we much prefer earlier applications. And the reason that we prefer earlier applications is so we can get a better handle on numbers, and we can work very closely with the partnership development unit. And remember, they're the people that organise the school placements, because they need quite a bit of time to make sure that everyone's been assigned placements. Okay, so the earlier the better, although we do interview July, beginning of August as well, if need be. Okay. Nadeem asks, is there car parking on site? There certainly is, and there is a fee to pay, and that's true for staff and students. Okay. All right. Okay, there was a couple of private questions. I won't read out the names. There was a question about car parking, which I've just answered. And then there was another question about, is it necessary to have some teaching experience in terms of voluntary experience? Good question. I mean, being pragmatic again at the moment, we realise that it's very, very difficult to actually get into schools to get that experience. Okay, so in normal circumstances, we would say, yes, it's really necessary that you do have some school experience. Although with COVID obviously making that difficult, we're saying to students, okay, we realise it might not be possible to have experience, for you to have experience. Okay, so we'll take that into account, and we look at every application on an individual level. So if you've not got experience of school teaching, okay, but you've got a very, very strong academic background, for example, then we would balance all of those things together. All right. Amber asked a question, do we apply through UCAS? You do, yeah, there's a kind of special portal of UCAS called UCAS Initial Teacher Training, and that's the portal through UCAS that you need to use. Okay, so those were all the private questions that I got. I hope that was okay that I answered those publicly. I'll just wait another couple of minutes just in case any more of you have questions that you want to ask. So again, I'll just go silent for a minute. I'm still here, don't worry. Thanks, Hannah. That's a good question. So does the university give priority to students with children to do their placements at schools that are close to the campus? Well, the way that we work out placements is we take all of those things into account. We certainly do. And we realise that a lot of our students might have caring responsibilities, even with their own children or other family members. So we absolutely take that into account. Normally what we do, or say we, what I mean is the partnership development unit who organise the placements. Normally what they do is they start off with the student's home postcode and they try and source them a school that's as close as possible to that home postcode, okay, to minimise the amount of travel time. However, that's not always possible, okay, so we do say to students that you should be prepared to travel up to an hour, okay, to get to your placement schools, and that's just the nature of doing a teacher education course in London, of course, with schools dotted around in various parts across the city, and it's also the nature of securing school placements, okay. But Hannah, when you apply for the course, if you get a place on the course, what we ask every student to do is fill out a questionnaire that then goes to the partnership development unit, and that asks for information about things like whether they've got caring responsibilities and that they need to do the school run themselves, or they need to be at home for various times for various reasons. It asks if they've got any disabilities, for example, that we ought to know about in factoring in travel and school placements. It asks for their home postcode so we can try and source you a placement as close as possible. It asks you things like whether you drive or not, or whether you're reliant on public transport, for example. So there's a number of different variables that we take into account, okay. Amber, good question. I think all school experience counts, okay. If it's recent, that's ideal, but again, I've said it earlier, very difficult to get into schools at the moment to gain experience. If you can get into schools to get some more recent experience, that's brilliant, okay, but absolutely your school experience as a teenager counts. I assume you mean when you weren't a student yourself there, Amber. Okay. Jessica's question about student loans. There is a student loan available, yeah, and that you can just find that through kind of the normal channels for student loan, the student loan company, etc. Yes, good question about the uni. Will the university select both the placement schools? We will, yeah, and we'll secure you 2 placement schools, and we'll try and find you 2 schools that are quite different from one another. Okay, so if you're in let's say a kind of top performing state grammar school for your first placement, then we'll try and find you a very different school for your second placement. Okay. Yes, I'm a work experience from when I was in secondary school myself. So again, I presume, okay, so you were a student in secondary school when you got your work experience. I think that's how I interpret that. Yeah, again, I think if you're drawing on school experience from you as a student, as a school student, I think it's probably important for you to get experience where you're positioned as a member of staff rather than a student, okay, if at all possible. All right. One thing that actually that a couple of people have managed to do is organise remote school experience, where because they might not be physically be able to go into a school at the moment, some schools have said to students, well, what we could do is we could allow you to kind of sit in on a lesson, and we'll just set up Zoom for you in the corner, so you could see the teacher. But that's obviously that depends on the school and the kind of relationship that you might have with the school. Okay. These are good questions, everybody. Okay, I'll just wait another minute just in case any of you have any more questions. Okay. Well, it looks like that might be the end of the questions. Okay. So I think if it's okay, we'll leave it there. But if you do have any further questions, then you can email my colleague Sunita, who's the director of initial teacher education. I'm putting her email address into the chat now. And Sunita will be able to kind of field any other questions that you might have about the course, or certainly point you in the right direction for the people that will be able to give you the answer. Okay. You're welcome, Mariam. It's always a pleasure. Oh, excellent English, brilliant, good stuff, Jessica. Okay, so thanks everybody for coming along this evening, and whatever you're doing the rest of this working week, I hope it goes well for you, and I hope that you manage to all have a very well-deserved Christmas break, I'm sure. And I hope to see some of you in September. Okay, that's great. Thanks, everybody. My colleague's going to close the session now. Take care and have a nice evening.